Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. We're back here at the Iron Tower and now I can finally reveal my ulterior motive for having an iron farm this productive in the first place. Being able to craft stacks and stacks of lanterns. And I'm only half kidding, because iron will get you, a single iron ingot will get you 9 iron nuggets, 8 of which gets you 1 lantern when combined with a torch, and so, obviously, producing this amount of iron is going to be able to get you a ton of lanterns. Not to mention the fact that we have renewable charcoal over there in the forest to get us renewable coal for torches, therefore lanterns for days. And lanterns are one of my favorite things about the new update. They are not exactly like a rare thing or particularly difficult to produce without a giant iron farm, but I do love the fact that we can now use these from my existing iron supply and not have to worry about getting more. Now, there are still a few straggling iron golems around the outside of the tower, which I'm going to try and finagle into the system to get turned into iron, because I'm sorry guys, but you wandering around here might impact the efficiency of the farm, such as it is at least. So what I'm going to do is grab a couple of leads that I had hanging around in the chests around here, and we're going to try and just drag them into the farm. I don't know for certain if Iron Golem AI has improved, because remember, the last time we used leads on Iron Golems, they kind of sketched out after that. They weren't entirely sure what they were doing and they wouldn't track towards zombies. So it's going to be interesting to see if, when we get the golems here back into this system, if they actually start going for the zombie who's in the middle there. The other two should be fairly straightforward to get to, but I think this one over here we might have to reach with scaffolding, because, yeah, I think we're probably going to need to build a path over to him so that he can walk back on it in the first place. But if we maybe end that about here, there we go. We should be able to lead him from here, and if we drag him down the scaffolding with us, so much the better, I suppose. There we go. Leads are not always the most reliable form of transportation, but this way it seems to work out pretty well. Now, is he going to take a look at the zombie up there? Aside from glitching out lighting-wise, yeah, I think they're still a little bit weirdly affected by leads. It looks like that hasn't been fixed. I don't know exactly why, but he does just seem to be kind of inching along the platform. Let's give him an extra nudge. There we go. This one over here by the waterfall probably needs to come over this way, and yeah, we'll just build a staircase to get him into this side. And it turns out golems can sort of climb scaffolding. They won't climb it like a staircase, but if you pillar up using scaffolding and then use a lead, you can actually kind of drag them up with you. They will use the scaffolding as like a set of stairs if you do that. So yeah, that's not such a bad strategy. I wonder if that could be used to move other mobs vertically as well, because that might solve a pretty big problem as far as like leading passive mobs around if you're taking them up to high places. Just bring a stack of scaffolding with you and see how you get on. Maybe we'll try that. Let's try that real quick. Let's say I want to get a cow up to a platform that I'm just going to make arbitrarily here out of bone blocks. Let's see if we can use a lead to bring the cow up here if we stack scaffolding blocks up this surface. Obviously, if you've got an overhang there, that's going to be a little bit more difficult because the cow will probably dangle from the lead a little bit. But if you've got the scaffolding up the side of it straight up like that, we might be able to get them up here. Let's find a cow. Hey, you'll do. Okay, come towards the scaffolding tower. Come towards the scaffolding tower. Let's see if they make their ascent. Maybe we can move a couple of blocks back here. Yeah, it looks like they got about halfway up. Okay, that's not too bad. Maybe if we move back a little bit here. Yes, there we go. Vertical cow movement. Quite straightforward. That a little bit faster than setting up a bubble column as well, because you can just stack scaffolding from the floor level. If you do it right at all, that is. Yeah, there we go. And all you should need to do really is attach a lead and get some height, and then you should be able to drag the cow up with you. Not bad. I think I'm going to let this cow wander in the wild. Thank you very much for your participation in this experiment. Now, just to take care of that last iron golem over there, and we'll be in business. Okay, with that taken care of, we're going to move on to the town over here, and I want to do some pretty serious planning today. We've covered town planning before when we laid out all of these roads and pathways and stuff. The problem being that a lot of the stuff around here is going to be fashion rather than function, right? We've got stuff like the concrete maker here, but for the most part, when I've been doing industrial things like farms, when I've been making large sort of structures out in the distance over there, those are all housing important things like a sugarcane farm, a cactus farm, pumpkins and melons, the iron farm, stuff like that. But none of that stuff is happening inside what I consider to be the main part of Founder's Forge. And so I haven't really built anything over here for a while, mainly because it's all going to be for show. It's not going to be anything to do with like the mechanics of stuff. And I don't tend to do tutorials about builds in particular because, yeah, like a lot of the time, like with the improvised kind of nature of the Iron Tower right now, a lot of the builds I do are pretty much winging it first try. Like, I can't do a block-by-block tutorial for something that I'm making up as I go along. So instead, what I thought I would do today is continue our town planning from ages and ages ago by laying out the foundations of a bunch of buildings here in the town, just to give the idea that the town has a structure to it and is a little bit more lived in. And while we're at it, we can work out where some of these smaller dwellings are going to be and where we can fit in some larger buildings, where we can build stuff around things like the concrete maker and the library enchanting setup around there that's kind of triggered using the lectern. Like, we got a bunch of stuff around here. Even the bamboo farms that we built in a previous episode do not yet have a build around them, and I kind of want to plan out some of that stuff today, if not actually execute on it, because as we've seen, building is something that takes quite a long amount of time. But I think it's really going to encourage me to do a little bit more building around here in my spare time if I have the foundations of some stuff built beforehand. So I'm going to grab a bunch of stone and stone brick, and we're going to use that pretty much exclusively to lay out the foundations of some of these buildings, because that's where I'm going to be starting the foundations of. Most of them are already stone and stone brick to begin with, so I want to continue that theme, and we can lay out the area where some of these houses are going to be. Now, some of you might be wondering how on earth I have so much stone and stone brick after having built a structure as large as the Iron Tower, which primarily uses stone and stone brick in its construction, and the answer to that, of course, is Haste 2 beacon mining. I've been doing a fair amount of resource gathering in live streams and stuff like that in the past, and I do have quite a lot of stone and stone brick, which is not particularly well represented by this shulker box. Let me head back to the storage system and give you a quick example. There we go, that's more like it. So I have a couple of shulker boxes here that are full of 27 stacks of smooth stone. We also have this entire double chest here and most of a double chest there as well. This is all stuff that I've brought up from a Beacon Haste 2 mine where I've been gathering stuff merrily off camera or on live streams. It's also why I have a bunch of stacks of diamond ore and stuff in here. That and the fact that I never really end up using any of my diamonds for anything because I have all of my mending gear and stuff. I never really need to make any new diamond tools. I just go and repair them every time. But the joy of collecting those resources is that it also gets us a whole bunch of stone, which I've mined using my Silk Touch pickaxe where I can, and I can convert a bunch of that into stone bricks as well. So I've got plenty of this, and we should probably actually swap out this shulker box for another one just so I can grab as much stone as possible and start to use up some of this. So here's the thing about the way I build houses, or structures in general. I recognize we're looking at a tavern here, so it's not necessarily what I consider a house, but the thing about the way I build structures is I typically go for a detached style of structure. Like, it doesn't link up to any other builds. The terrace over here of shops is a big exception to that, and it was a conscious effort by me to try and link a bunch of these buildings together, and I think it actually looks quite good that way. The thing I tend to do when I've got one build at a time to focus on is I will build it, and I'll build the roof structure, and I'll build the decorations and stuff on the outside, and I don't leave any room for it to be attached to something else, and I don't really like modifying my builds all that much after I have built them. So what I end up doing is building a lot of individual structures that don't really connect in any way. And that's not typically how cities work. You'll find that in a lot of cities around the world, you'll find a lot of houses just tend to share walls and are kind of built very close together. And in terraces and in semi-detached houses and link-detached houses and stuff where there are, you know, there's one side of the house could be considered detached, but then there is a shared wall to another side of the house that's usually kind of symmetrical. That's how a lot of the houses in my neighborhood are built. I live in one, so, you know, it's strange to me that I don't build houses like that more often. And I think part of the reason for that is because I don't lay down foundations for a bunch of different structures at once. I tend to go one structure at a time, and so everything gets built in a way that means, yep, it's finished, it's a done deal, it's a complete package, but it doesn't actually neighbor anything else too directly. And we're building in sort of plot sizes here. We're building in kind of relatively small sections connected by roads, so there may be some scope for these detached houses here and there, but I really do think we need to spend a little bit more time connecting our houses up and having foundations set for a bunch of different dwellings that are all supposed to be separate from each other, but will have shared roofs roofs and shared walls and that kind of stuff. Really helps the area feel a little bit more diverse and a little bit more lived in. One of the other things I think is really successful about this set of shops in particular is that they're on a diagonal, and I don't build on diagonals much either, mainly because it's kind of difficult to decorate them a lot of the time, but you end up with a really dynamic feel for a city if all of your structures aren't just straight on. Like, having a row of shops like that at an angle really kind of sets a different kind of character to the place, and it stops everything feeling like a grid, which towns like this would not a lot of the time. And a lot of our pathways that we built around here are organic in nature. They kind of feel like wandering foot pathways more than, you know, grids that are set up for cars to use and stuff like that. And so I feel like it makes more sense to build a few more builds which are strictly diagonal, or at the very least they have angles to them and they can wrap around some of the roads and stuff here. But while we're planning this stuff out, in much the same way that we planned out the roads with a bird's eye view originally, I think it's going to be a good idea to switch to an eye in the sky view so we can take a look at where some of these foundations are being laid, look at the city from the top down, and really get a feel for how it's coming together. So I'm going to switch to the camera account, and I'll see you guys there. Hey folks, welcome back. So we've got our eye in the sky set up. If you can't see me, I'm heading down towards the enchanting setup over there, kind of on the right of the Blacksmith's Guild, jumping up and down on the bookshelves. Yep, that's me right there. So we're going to start laying out a few foundations for the town here. I'm going to grab, I've also got a box of grass blocks here as well, because there are some features of the town which, while they look quite interesting in terms of the landscape, I think we are probably going to have to cover over and fill in a little bit in order to get the town feeling a little bit better for building. Because yeah, even though these like features like the kind of sinkhole that we have over here, this kind of large grass basin over here, they look nice, but I don't think we're really going to be able to incorporate that into the structure of the town. We could do it, but I feel like the way it's shaped right now probably isn't ideal. So what I am going to do is come down here with a couple of lanterns, actually, because I used up all my torches crafting lanterns, and I'm going to light this area up so that we'll have as few mob spawns down here as possible if I just end up covering over the area with grass blocks, which is most likely what I'm going to do at this stage. It might make it a little bit awkward for if we want to build something on the top of here and, I don't know, make a basement or something like that, but hey, at least most of that is already dug out for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is just fill this in so it's flattened out and it looks quite similar to the rest of the terrain around it. And while I'm not normally an advocate for completely flattening things, I like to have a little bit of the terrain shape in my builds. I think it's probably going to work out better if we have a flat surface on which to plan some of this stuff. There we go, and I've still kept a gentle slope to the landscape just to preserve the sense of it being a sort of more dynamic terrain, but now instead of a giant hole that we felt like we had to work around, we've got a large plot that we can use for a nice little cluster of houses. And this feels like a space that we could probably put in a diagonal house here on the corner like so, making sure that we make all of the angles very strict, so we're working with 3-block long sections for a diagonal wall here, and we can basically mirror that on the other sides as well, so that the house can at least look sort of regular. But the entire house doesn't have to be a diagonal, and over here on the corner where we couldn't exactly fit in another building next to the road, we could always give this a kind of square outbuilding on the side here, just so that we can fill in this space with something a little bit different. Maybe there could be a chimney here, maybe just a tower on the corner of the house, that kind of thing. Maybe the house next to that can have a slightly different angle to the wall, so instead of working with 3-block long walls, we're working with 2-block long walls, creating a kind of alleyway space in the middle, which is going to be too tight to walk into in some places, but I want to light those up to make sure that mobs don't end up spawning in there. And in the meantime, we can bring the wall out on this side a little bit here until it reaches the back wall of that house. We'll give this house a straight front wall and a straight back wall, but we will make the whole thing diagonal on the sides, which is going to give a nice dynamic element to it. I like the fact that we've got a little alleyway that could even contain back entrances to both of these houses if we wanted to. Keeping in mind that we want that alleyway to be accessible from the road, let's leave a little bit of a space between this house and the next one, just to kind of create a walk-through space that we should be able to access easily on foot. And then for the back wall here, let's actually square that off. We could actually create a nice little courtyard feature in between those houses. And for the last house here, we are just going to square it off at the back. So we have an alleyway that can only really be accessed from one side of this cluster of buildings. And so at this point, from an area that's roughly the same size as the Fox-themed tavern we have on the opposite side of town, we've actually got 4 or 5 buildings clustered into a much more densely packed space. And these are all going to be residential houses, so they could all be fairly straightforward as far as interiors and stuff go. They could even use verticality a little bit more and have some houses that have 2 or 3 or even 4 floors to them, just to give the impression that you can fit more people into a more densely packed space. Of course, not all of the houses in this area will have to be regular shapes. Some of them can be a little bit different, but bear in mind that you're adding complexity to stuff like the roof structure if you end up building a house that isn't all that regular. You could potentially end up overcomplicating things further down the line if you build some weird looking foundations in the meantime. So bear that in mind, and I recommend keeping some of the more irregularly shaped houses a little bit smaller unless you're making them irregular shapes in sections, like if you're using a 5x5 layout of squares and having a bunch of individual squares kind of clustered together, which is something we could do for our final house back here. Let's go with a 5x5 build pattern so that we can just make a bunch of squares like so. By chaining together a set of 5x5 squares, then breaking down the walls that connect them, what you end up with is a pretty simple to build but very dynamic house layout that can be sort of modular, so you can add or remove segments as you choose, make them higher or lower, taller or smaller depending on what you want that house to look like. And most importantly, you don't give yourself too hard of a time with the roof layout. Roofs are one of my least favorite things to do in Minecraft when it comes to building, and a house like this can be relatively straightforward to do. You can just build modular roof sections that you can copy and paste almost over and over again, and it really lends a nice feel to a larger building like this. At this point, I'm pretty sure you folks get the idea. We're working with a variety of different shapes and clustering them together in a way that feels a little bit more like a city and a bit less like a series of unconnected structures. So I'm going to speed things up a bit. We're going to do the rest of this in the form of a time lapse, and when we come back, we'll take a walk around and see what all of this looks like from ground level. Hey folks, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the time lapse, and now we have a bit more of a town to walk around instead of a loose collection of buildings. We are not yet done exactly. There's definitely a few other areas that I would like to put some foundations for buildings, but I kind of want to take care of some of these first. I sort of want to make sure that these are actually going to sit in the places they're currently sitting, but I like this already. We're going to have a little bit of space around here for what I was going to build for the Alchemist's Guild, but then as we come up the path here, we've already got a house on this side that's going to cross over this section that I kind of impromptu turned into a river. I like the idea of there being some sort of water spring situation here, and then that flows down towards what is actually this big lake over on this side. So we're incorporating water features into the structure of the town a little bit as well. But as we walk around here, this is the first little cluster of buildings I was putting together with this alleyway that leads through to a courtyard, and then this one here kind of gets closed off, and there are pathways that lead into each of these two houses. We're going to put a couple of doors around here as well. So there's going to be one there, there's going to potentially be one there, and that's going to be a solid wall, not made of doors. I just didn't have any of the stone bricks on me that I tried to click on there. There we go. So if you imagine kind of walking into this area, just having a little courtyard, maybe a back entrance to one of these houses as well, and you've already got a little bit of space that's doing something beyond just being an intersection between these few houses. We might even have like a little kind of well back here or something like that for people to get water from, perhaps. Back out on the main street, we've got a couple of houses here leading up to the house next to the forge, and this is one that I built on streams a while ago because I wanted to add a few more houses, but this kind of suffers from the same problem of just being a completely detached house, even though I really like the interior. I'm pretty proud of how some of that came together, especially the fireplace with the new campfire looks especially good, I think. But yeah, on the right-hand side here, we have a house where the doorway kind of mirrors the doorway for that house, and so I kind of think it would be nice to have, if not symmetrical houses, then at least have two houses on opposite sides of the street that look like they might have been built around the same time. Of course, the blacksmith's forge is over here, and on this side we have a couple more structures. That's the kind of first 5x5 house that we built with all of the different chambers to it. And then coming down here, I've added in a little stairway down to another house down here that could be a large house, or it could be two smaller houses if we wanted to split some of these up. I didn't want to build anything too close to the castle, though, because I figured we would probably at least have some kind of ornamental gardens or something out the front here, especially if the entrance to the castle is going to be permanently open. It helps the space feel a little bit more social, I guess. But we still have a pathway coming down here that the carts and stuff could roll up to the castle to have their goods inspected, and it doesn't really matter that much that people are going to be living right up close to the castle. In fact, we could even have some of these buildings mean something slightly different. They don't have to all be residences. It's just kind of the vibe I'm working with right now. I have left a little bit of green space in between the houses and the ravine here because I did mention I wanted to turn both sides of this ravine into a kind of work yard where people are, you know, pulling stuff up from the ravine, maybe even including some of the cranes like the one we built over at the fossil dig site. I think that would be really cool, and having a little bit of space to do that means that we can always come through and build a little bit of extra stuff later. I imagine anybody who has a house near the ravine is potentially going to be worried about, you know, the ash and stuff from the ravine coming up. Maybe one of these veins of magma even coming up to the surface and damaging the house. Like, I added some cracked stone brick to the side of that house preemptively, thinking that the heat might actually have damaged some of the structure, so that's something we can work with here as well. But the whole space still feels very much like you can walk around it, which is the idea, really. This needs to be a town that you can explore if you're wandering around on foot and not just look at from above. Now, this space down here I did still want to leave as a bit of a public park, so I haven't put any foundations there, but coming down the steps on this side, we have a space for the library around that enchanting setup that I demonstrated the lectern functionality with. We've got another building here on the left-hand side as well, kind of next to the blacksmith's guild, which is helping that building feel a little bit more like it's got company now. We have our marketplace area over there that we worked on before, but around the back here, we now have some of the buildings that start to lead to Old Town as well. We've got an outbuilding here that might be attached to the library or might be something completely different. We've got a few others around here leading up to what we have around the bamboo farm, which is a little bit more of a kind of more complex structure. I think it's going to be a little bit weird building a roof for this thing, but I will try my best, and it's got these kind of two wings to it. Just the better to enclose some of the stuff that we've already built in here without having to mess with the mechanisms too much. Over here we've got one house that's completely diagonal, a bunch of others that are diagonal to kind of suit the plots of grass that we had for them, and I think each of these, once they are built up a little bit more, could be like a crumbled down, slightly aging house, especially where what I wanted to do was have some of this kind of decay of the land coming in with the mycelium and the brain coral. I think that's going to look really good if it starts to, you know, corrupt the stone of some of these nearby houses. Like, it's either something coming from the swamp or it's some kind of effect of having the ravine and all of that weird geothermal power in close proximity. And this all connects pretty well to the stuff we've already got built in the town, like the row of shops up here, and I will eventually put in some more foundations leading up to the house where the blast furnace is up there on the hill. But I think this is really starting to feel like more of a town now we've done a little bit more around here. There are still some areas like this spot here, around here, or maybe even some of the spots underneath the trees could have little structures, but I do like the idea of including some green space in the city, as though people can come out here and relax if they want to, because a city is not just going to be made up of homes and shops, it's going to be made up of all kinds of other things that these folks need to get through their day, and sometimes that means sitting down on a park bench in a nice green space like this, or over by the pond over there, and having some time to relax. I hope getting a look at this from above, getting a look at the aerial view, has given you a decent idea of how to put together a town of your own. It's kind of similar in a way to what we did when we were building the castle originally, just laying down all of these footprints before we decide on what's next, but I think together they will form quite an interesting little town here, and it's a surprise quite how many structures you can squeeze in. Even though we know we have a massive space here, all of the stuff I've built before seems to have been quite large, and so just working with these smaller spaces, these kind of smaller opportunities to build little houses, I think is going to be a really nice change of pace for us. We can work on these one at a time. Maybe not all on camera, maybe we'll just do bits and pieces of them on camera and off camera, but I think this should be a pretty good start to completing the town of Founders Forge before we move on to any more significant projects further down the line. So that is going to be it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like on the episode if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.